my guest is Elizabeth Lanter. Elizabeth, or Liz, is an independent consultant and clinician. She has worked with
think I've ever stopped to think about that specific case in the context of infant mental health. But right, so these are teenagers, and in the beginning of our talk, even then I thought, what did these parents miss? And so if we think about that in the terms of infant mental health, what were they missing even back then? And I'm not saying there was warning signs back then. I'm talking about the attachment that was developing back then. Does
yes.
that make sense? So, was the parent able to fully understand their kids and be attentive to these kids? Did their kids grow up, develop with the development that my parents don't really check in on me? My parents don't really aren't attuned to my needs. So that's kind of the pattern that I probably would suspect. I know nothing about that case, but that's the pattern that I would suspect. That are these parents really kind of clued in to the emotional cueing, subtle or overt, that their kids are giving off, and I don't think that's something that was talked about back in the 90s. Kids' emotional well-being and emotional health, and definitely not starting in infancy. And so this is again, how our parents understanding the emotional needs of their kids starting at a young age, so they can be kind of in tune with that at a young age. And that's a skill that then the parents can take into um teenagehood. I think most parents are able to be like, you seem a little off today, what's going on? You seem upset today, what's going on? And having those conversations with your kids about their emotional health, their mental health. But that starts with being attuned with them. And that's what starts in infancy, with you being able to read your kids' nonverbal cues of, hey, something's off with their emotions right now. And then being in the attachment dance that starts in infancy into teenagehoods of, let's talk about that. Let's have a conversation about that. And again, that attachment dance starts in infancy of being in tune. And what am I trying to say here? When you read your baby's cues and you respond to it, and you respond in a meaningful way, that can build up into having meaningful conversations with your teenager.
Yeah, I love this. I love this. And you know what popped in my mind? The cried out method. Ouch.
Yes. Yes.
Ouch. It's
Yeah.
so many people think it's a great idea.
Right. And it was told to parents that it was a great idea, right? I
Yes,
mean,
yes.
my mom, I believe, used it with me.
And
That's
my
what was
mom
popular.
definitely used it with me.
Yeah, that's what was popular in the 80s. And, and this is where, like, coming full circle, as a mom now, as a fully grown adult, I know my mom loves me, and she didn't do those things to harm me. She did that because that's what she knew, right? She thought she was doing a good job by letting me
Yeah,
cry it
yeah.
out, right?
Yeah, my
And
mom thought
so
that she was
my
training
mom knew,
me.
right? If she knew better, she would do better. She would have done better, right? And my mom
Yes,
has come to my
absolutely.
presentations. My mom has come to my presentations and is fascinated by this. And she was like, I wish this was around when I was a mom. I would have done things differently. I'm really sorry about what I did, And so again, I'm not harboring all this anger towards my mom for the way that she did things. But it was a beautiful to have that conversation with her and kind of repair any kind of lingering things from our infancy. But yeah, so a baby that like was left to cry it out, those internal beliefs that start to develop of, I have to do this on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's here to meet my cries. Nobody's here to meet my needs. And again, those are kind of very generalized and, can
Of
develop
course.
differently based on how, intense those cry out periods were, how attentive they were throughout your infancy or throughout your day. So all
Mm-hmm.
of that, definitely plays a factor. We're speaking in generalities here, but yeah. So, we learned as babies we're kind of on our own. We
Yes.
have to learn how to figure out our emotions on our own. And I think for the most of us, we as parents are saying, "Hey, that didn't feel good," and we're trying to do better and differently for
Mm-hmm.
our own children with the skills that we have.
Yes. Um, so a person, an adult person who had this experience and who was raised with the cried out method and all of those things, and they have what you just mentioned, that the feeling, the belief that they have to deal with everything alone, and they have to, regulate themselves, and uh, also, yeah, that they have to do it all alone. How can a person that feels like that heal this and move on from this?
Very, very great question. And again, I'm going to oversimplify it.
Yes, of
And,
course.
because for some people, some of my clients, I mean, this is years and years and years of, so again, we're talking infancy, but if that's the way the parents have been taught to deal with their kids, they're not necessarily going to be fully attentive to their emotional needs in toddlerhood, school age, pre-adolescent, adolescence. It becomes a cycle unless that cycle is broken. And,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, what that means then is that we as adults have to break our own cycle. And at
Right.
that point, yeah. And then at that point, really, we become the parents for ourselves. We have to parent
Mm-hmm.
us um, the way that we wanted to be parented, that we needed to be parented, or that we weren't parented.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what that looks like is having a co regulation with yourself. So, in
Mm-hmm.
infancy, learning about emotions is having your parent support you in your emotional development. And so, what that looks like in adulthood is you
Mm-hmm.
having to check in with yourself more cognitively, more with more awareness,
Mm-hmm.
and more effort, to kind of develop that co-regulation of the person who you are with the person that you want to be.
Right. So, let me like create a picture, and have you please explain a bit. So we have a person who asks themselves, "Who? How am I feeling now? I'm feeling upset. Ooh, what do I need now? I need to be soothed. And how will I do this? I will have a hot bath or a nice meal or call my friend.
Yes.
And and then how does this help the person um, like heal and improve and do this more easily, or not have to do it as you said, cognitively and consciously, and with all this awareness that has to be really huge to achieve this at any moment.
Um, so if I'm understanding your question correctly, I mean, I think the big thing is you have to reparent yourself and tell yourself, I am worthy of this. I
Mm-hmm.
deserve, these things that I deserve. It's safe to check in with my emotions. And so
Uh-huh.
that's kind of the harder part, and where again I would, definitely, if you're feeling like you need support on this, reach out to a therapist, because, for some people it felt unsafe
Mm-hmm.
to express our emotions. And, that could have been because, somebody could have been abused or harmed from showing emotions.
Mm-hmm.
That happens. But for a baby, your whole sense of safety is
Mm-hmm.
based on having your parent attend to your physical and emotional needs. And so for a baby, if those needs are not attended to, it feels unsafe. And so, that's where some of that embodiment work of like carrying those emotions in your body, and trauma is about feeling unsafe. And so people might think, well, of course the baby was safe, I gave them food, they had a house to live in, but
Mm-hmm.
this is really talking about emotional safety. That's what infant mental health and trauma work is. And so we have to allow ourselves to understand it's safe to feel emotions, because as a whole, us humans were not taught that, have not been taught
Mm-hmm.
that for generations. And this is just the science behind it, of why it is incredibly important for us to, starting in infancy, feel safe and validated,
Mm-hmm.
and that our needs can be met when we feel emotions.
Mm-hmm. Liz, do you have any advice for adults who are faced with this issue?
Um, I would say the biggest thing would be is allow yourself to validate your own feelings. Your
Mm-hmm.
feelings are real. Your feelings are telling you something, and
Mm-hmm.
allow yourself to feel safe feeling those emotions, and have grace for yourself. Be gentle with yourself. You're learning a brand new skill. It would be like us expecting you to start reading a book if you never really went to school, in
Right.
your childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So if you weren't really taught emotional development, for however long, um, and whatever inconsistency, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard. You're gonna have good days. You're gonna have bad days. It's gonna be easier. I always talk about in my work with my clients, peeling back layers of an onion, and so that's kind of the big joke with some of my clients. They'll be like, we uncovered another layer. And yep, yep, there are lots of layers to healing. and
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes it's easier to feel some emotions than it is to feel others. We in therapy world, we talk about how anger is the protector of sadness, and so it's easier to express anger, because right, it comes from, we feel unsafe experiencing sadness. And again, as an infant mental health specialist, I see that as, usually babies express sadness, right? That's, they don't express anger in the way we see it in older children
Mm-hmm.
or adults. And so if it was unsafe to experience that and express that, then we learn to protect that, and it comes out as anger. And so sometimes, people get scared that they've cleared the anger, but now it's sadness. And I always tell my
Mm-hmm.
clients, that's good, you have made progress, you have let down the anger guard, and now you can get to the really mushy gushy deep parts of your body, that of the sadness.
You mentioned the onion.
Yes.
And I want to ask you, what does healing look like? There are layers to it, but many people think it's
Yes.
a linear thing. It's from A to B, and then there is an end to it, and it's over, and you're healed. But could you please explain what healing is and what it looks like and what a person should expect?
It's definitely not linear. Definitely not, because you're going to be triggered. And that trigger is to um, bring out maybe a new layer, or, to see how well you're responding. So pay attention to that. So when I think about, how well is an infant or a parent doing with their um, healing or their emotional expression, I think of the duration, the frequency, and the intensity of the emotion. I've
Mm-hmm.
worked with toddlers who, are having 3-hour temper tantrums every day, right? And
Wow.
so, yeah, and so, we talk about, okay, it's only 5 days a week and now it's only 2 hours, right? And that still feels so exhausting for the
I bet.
parent, but as the outside, yeah, as the outside clinician, it's like, but look at, we're making progress. And
Mm-hmm.
and again, I even had one parent say, but now they're crying all the time. And I was like, that is good. They're feeling safe, expressing their deeper emotions to you versus the I need to protect myself and be angry and put on this like aggressive temper tantrum. And so really like honoring the small milestones throughout the journey, I think is probably the best advice that I can give. Also,
Mm-hmm.
um, just knowing that healing is never ending and we just have to
Mm-hmm.
honor our progress throughout. Yeah, because we're going to get triggered. We're going to develop new skills. We're going to learn new things about ourselves and our journey. Um, and that's just the way it is.
And it gets better. It gets easier.
It gets better and it gets easier. Yeah, 100%.
So, could you please explain how the attention deficit disorder stems from infancy? How it is related
Yeah.
and
So,
correlated?
yeah. So I'm trained in a model or a framework called the neural relational framework. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
really like understanding brain development in infancy, and the stages of development. And one of the early stages of development around the 9-month mark, is our ability to be in an attachment dance, is what we call it. The Harvard Brain Institute calls it serve and return. But it's being able to be attentive. How long can you be in this attachment dance with your caregiver? And so some of it is, the baby's ability, but some of it is the parent's ability. And so when I'm working with parents of infants, that's one of the things I'm looking at. Is the parent, for example, I had a client, where it was like, here's a ball. And the baby was taking a little bit to like, look at the ball and what do I do with it? And then the parent interpreted that as they're not interested in it. And then, let me quick go to a puzzle and then kind of like put a puzzle in their face. And then the baby was like, well, what's this? And, um, so the parent wasn't attuned to what the baby was doing and kind of keeping the attachment dance going, keeping the attention going. And so the baby was taught to kind of have this like jarring back and forth attention because that's kind of what mom was doing, as opposed to,
Mm-hmm.
what I had to work with the mom on is, let's just sit and wonder with the ball with the baby. Let's slow down, you know. Oh, look at this ball. It's blue. It's round. Can you throw it? Can you roll it to me? Let me roll it to you. And you're even seeing my voice slow and my voice change, because I was embodying kind of mom's energy, right? Like that I was experiencing in that session. She was very hyperactive. She was very kind of all over the place in her ability to play with her baby. And so we slowed that down, just sit with him, just sit and be present. Let him look at the ball, let him wonder what's happening in this room with you, and that just kind of helped them slow down and have better attention with each other, and work on that attachment dance.
Mm-hmm. So, how can you explain how the actual I don't know how to put it, how ADD like protects a baby, why it is developed?
So what he what that baby was learning was, I have to kind of have this fast movement to keep in this attachment dance with my mom. I have
Mm-hmm.
to kind of move from activity to activity because that's what my mom is doing, and I don't have time to sit and wonder about this ball. I don't have time, to really engage in this one activity. What he was presumably learning is, that quick movement is, and again, I'm not sure if I would use the word protective, but that is an interesting concept to consider. It's more like what babies are learning of, this is just how it works. This is just how the world
Adoptive, maybe.
works. Yeah, he's adapting to his environment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the protective piece would be, you know, a baby, of course, wants to adapt to their parent. They of course want to be attuned to their caregiver, and so they're
Mm-hmm.
adapting to how their parent um, interprets the world and provides for them,
Mm-hmm.
provides the
Mm-hmm.
understanding of how their world is.
Hmm. I I feel kind of that um the weight of the responsibility of a parent is like enormous when I hear those things.
Yeah, yeah, and I hear that a lot when I do these presentations,
Uh-huh.
and that is absolutely not what I'm trying to convey. And that is, the hard part with talking about that, because that, and again, having grace for our parents, um, when you talked about what we can do, that's also important. But for me, that's like a couple steps down, because again,
Mm-hmm.
as babies, and if we're really needing that support, we need to first honor ourselves and our emotions, and especially if that wasn't given to us as babies. Does that make sense? And
Mm-hmm.
then we can start to have grace for our parents, but that's part of the healing process. And I think it's too hard for parents or adults first to have grace for their parents. First, they need to like just be allowed to get out all their emotions, and then they can start to more clearly see the bigger picture of like, my parents were acting in in the best way, and we have to remember that our kids are going to do that one day. My kids are going
Mm-hmm.
to do that one day, right? They're going to look back at my good things and my struggles and be like, this was her journey, and this is what it taught me,
Mm-hmm.
and this is what I've learned from it, and this is where I can have grace for my stepmom, for my mom, for my whoever. And that is a part of the healing process. That is like, really far down the line, and I don't think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people get there, but that is a part of the healing process, understanding that we are humans. Nobody is
Mm-hmm.
perfect. We are all, you know um acting in accordance with the guidance that was given to us by our
Mm-hmm.
DNA, by our parents, by our cultural society at that time. And that's just how we continue to grow and evolve as a species, as a
Mm-hmm.
entirety.
Um, well, I believe that a key to this, what you just described, is gratitude and feeling gratitude for all the good things that our parents
Yes.
taught us and gave us, and um, and I'm thinking of this cycle of the intergenerational cycle of passing on trauma to the next generation, because that's what you were taught. And my question to
Mhm.
you is, do you have any tips on how we can feel empowered to break the cycle?
Well, and you're absolutely right, about the gratitude piece, because I think that's so important, for us to talk about, and a good place, to end on a good note. Just as much as we have to acknowledge, you know, the shortcomings or the difficulties of our childhood,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's important to highlight what is going well. So, there's a lot of amazing things that I learned, um, from my parents. And, I've learned to integrate that you can do this kind of attitude, and that's made me a successful woman.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think you have to learn how to integrate your story, right? Your of who you are and what you learned, and how you're using that to make the world a better place. um but yeah, I would definitely say having the gratitude. I would definitely say, again, just honoring all the parts of you, all the parts of um you know um what you're bringing to the table. And the first step in any change is
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging. So if you are just even acknowledging your childhood trauma, you are one step in the right direction. In order to climb Mount Everest, you have to take the first step, right? You have to
Mm-hmm.
book the trip.
Mm-hmm.
You have to say you're going to do it. I'm not saying I'm going to climb Mount Everest, because I know I will never do it. But somebody who says, I'm going to do this, and then starts the planning process, they're one step ahead of me,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not going to climb Mount Everest. And so if you even acknowledge your childhood trauma, I think, and that you want to work on things, I think you're in the right direction, and honor that.
Wow. I think that all of your insight is precious, and yeah, but, I loved our conversation. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Again, I think, making sure people have grace for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want a lot of pressure on people. That's the last thing I want, is to leave people feeling guilty or feeling negative. I want to leave
Mm-hmm.
people feeling empowered, that I can be shaping my baby's future based on these magical moments that I'm having with them in infancy. And just
Mm-hmm.
remembering that, we all, have good days and bad days. And a bad day isn't going to detrimentally, shape your baby in the context of many, many good days. And I think it's very easy for us to focus, on the negatives. And as you beautifully said, gratitude, so go to bed thinking of all the magical moments you had with your
All the things
baby.
that went right. Yes.
All the things that went right. Yes, yes. It's important to have awareness of, this stuff, so we can be
Mm-hmm.
better. But that doesn't mean we're horrible, right?
Yes.
There's lots of magic happening every day between parents and babies, despite all of the societal pressures and the traumas and the stress and the illnesses and all those things that work against us. There's people continually to do magical things every day. And so just hold and honor that.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, dear Liz.
Yes, yes. This was wonderful.
Thank you for listening to the Theorem podcast. Connect with me on social media at Aspasia Provu and at theorem.podcast and share your thoughts. You may support us on Patreon. Visit the website aspasiaprovu.com/theorem for more. Τα λέμε σύντομα. Meaning talk to you soon in Greek. Aspasia's Theorem podcast does not provide advice, medical or any other kind. It just presents the opinions of its host and guests. If you have any specific problems, please visit your physician or a medical expert for help. Anything said should not be taken as a replacement for medical, clinical, or professional advice, diagnosis, or medical intervention. The episodes of Aspasia's Theorem podcast may, at times, cover sensitive topics including, but not limited to, mental health, nutrition, health, politics, spirituality, alternative medicine, energy healing, and the use of plant medicines. You're advised to refrain from continuing if you are adversely impacted by any of these topics.